So I was curious, as an editor, are you ever looking for ideas, suggestions for stories, particularly with the featuring equipment? And I wondered if when you talk about equipment used on farms today, I think it's been 20 years since I traded in my loader tractor, and it's gone more towards types of equipment like this, as well as a backhoe that isn't here today. But if there's ever any interest in doing features on whether the difference between the different types of loaders, or with, say for instance, on the right over here, the New Holland, I believe what they'd call a subcompact loader, a front end loader, and whether doing a comparative feature on the different brands within that size. I know I looked at several of them before purchasing that, and then whether that would lead into, as you can see here, we pan around, maybe you'd call it attachment disorder or what, but just the versatility of the amount of attachments. And you know, I guess growing up, the only thing I had to start farming with was a John Deere M and a horse-drawn equipment. We never had anything like a loader, and so I guess I'm still fascinated by the efficiency of the amount of work that it can do, particularly with hydraulics. And so I guess if we started over here on the left, I don't know, this is probably number 4 skid steer, but crazy the efficiency of the track unit. Here you can see where we've taken a 3-point piece of equipment where we've needed the tractor during haying season, and used the skid steer as a power unit. The telehandler, very versatile on the farm. You can see here it's got the 7-foot forks that we've put together. We got those out of an industrial use and repurposed them, welded the brackets. Very handy to have. On the front end loader is what's called a tie grabber, where it picks up 18 square bales at a time. In a haying operation, you can kind of see the stacks in the background, and it actually wraps a twine around it. If we go over to the other side here, so some of this is pretty self-explanatory. Forks, I guess we never have too many forks. I think we're actually missing a couple sets here. Here's an example, early on one that we fabricated in the shop, and had adapter plates made up to quick coupler that we put on a backhoe unit. Back here you can see the bucket that we have adapted. Sometimes we'll buy industrial grade buckets and then fabricate our own adapters. This particular one would fit on the telehandler. Example of modifying purchased buckets. Back here, maybe these buckets are a little more unique. Some of the equipment we'll borrow from other industries. This example of a tree bucket from the landscaping typically, but we've modified it, put the headache rack on it, modified it to fit our equipment. Very handy for removing large rocks. This particular one, kind of a very handy little, very inexpensive bucket called a stump bucket. Just example of something where you'd purchase it and unbelievable amount of uses for it. This one particular gets used a lot in the winter time for removing hard-packed glaciers out of barnyards. It can break up a lot of material. So here's just an example of some of the hay spears, a couple of the ones that we've manufactured, and purchased one, but one thing they have in common, they all have the double sharp spear and the narrow spear. Incredible difference in efficiency, whether you pick up 2 bales or just the handling it, as opposed to the single spear. As far as in our land clearing, The grapple, again, a fairly inexpensive piece for the amount of work that'll do, whether clearing land, picking up brush, rocks, pen pack manure works excellent on, and again, the versatility, whether we would use that on the skid steer depending on the terrain or the close conditions, or on the front end loader where we're going to have to travel further and just the speed going back and forth. Same thing on these two pieces. The hydraulic front end brush hogs, these will use and come up to say a 10-12 foot tree, raise it up and just shred the tree as you go down, or use it on the ground for clearing brush and shredding it behind. Behind is a little lighter version, used more in steep terrain on the hilly pastures and cleaning up around the farmstead. It's like a front mount mower that would go anywhere. Here's another bale grapple that would pick up the 18 bales, and then if we can just we'll move over here and I'll just show some of our adapters and some of the equipment, more equipment that we fabricated. Like any farm, the greatest fear is always a breakdown of a main piece of equipment right during harvest and at night or weekends. So we're always trying to have overlap or redundancy in some of the equipment, and so a lot of these cases we're building adapters. This is an example of a grapple that would fit the JCB telehandler, but then wanting to use it on the loader, whether for application or in case the machine might be down. Fabricated an adapter that just with one pin will be removed, and then the original machine would hook to it. But then this using the typical SSL plate, which either the skid steer or the loader would take. Another example of an adapter would be back here, going from the JCB hookup to the bale grapple. So here we've adapted what we had originally fabricated as a mount for this bale squeeze, which picks up our wrapped silage bales, and really only gets used a couple days a year. So maybe a dozen bolts, and this could quickly be removed from that, attached to one of the grapples if we need to go that route. Here's just a couple of examples of fabricated equipment for our own use here. A boom, very handy for unloading equipment or setting wall sections on the barn. Extends out, uses the spring-loaded locking pin there. This larger bucket here, steel framework, but then with just a treated plywood frame. Very handy in spring cleanup, just being able to move bulk material into it, carry it down the road quickly and dump it, and also just transporting large cumbersome objects around the farm. This I built several years ago, goes on the front of the skid steer, just a tined implement that uses the Danish tine for the vibratory action, but in our pen packed pens to shake up the manure in the bedding and keep the biology going, and works great for that. Another project out of pallet rack tubing and then just square tubing is the man box that would go on the forks and allow us to be safely work on the barns. And there's kind of a specialty one that we put together out of a SSL plate and just a coulter sharpened where we can slice a silage bale in half fairly quickly as that rotates and cuts through it. Doesn't work quite as well on straw. Straw is certainly a little tougher to cut, but again, just examples of projects out of the shop, and so anyways, I just wanted to share that if it's of any interest to anyone.